ADL, the Anti-Defamation League, has came out with sort of their annual report on the state of anti-Semitism or state of generally anti-Jewish sentiments, and it's not getting better. In fact, it's getting much worse. There's a bit of an uptick since the last year, but also more generally, a huge uptick in hundreds of percent compared to a few years ago. So today we'll go through some of the report. We'll go through generally also, sort of thinking back to 2024, everything that happened, all the, all the protests, all the, people might remember the Amsterdam event, all of that happened sort of as the result of anti-Semitism and the rise of anti-Semitism. Joining me today are Marco, Richard, and Alex. After a long time, it's great to see her. Welcome to the reality show. And yeah, I'll just start with a comment from Jonathan Greenblatt, who is the CEO of Anti-Defamation League. People might remember from our yesterday's episode, he was mentioned as this guy. He's such a bad guy. He doesn't even think Israel is a apartheid state. So obviously there's something wrong with him. But he commented on this report saying this horrifying level of anti-Semitism should never be accepted. And yet, as our data shows, it has become a persistent and grim reality for American Jewish communities. Jewish Americans continue to be harassed, assaulted, and targeted for who they are on daily basis and everywhere they go. But let's be clear, we will remain proud of our Jewish culture, religion, and identities, and we will not be intimidated by bigots. So we can go into the numbers a bit later, but first, someone who actually lives in Israel, let me go to Alex. What do you make of, I'm not sure if you traveled much in 2024, sort of like outside of Israel, but what do you make of the general rise of anti-Semitism, maybe specifically in 2024, but definitely as an aftermath of October 7th?
hmm Yeah, I mean, first of all, I just want to say, like, I think that Jonathan Greenblatt is a very, uh, I really don't like him. I have to admit it. I think he's very disingenuous, and I think that everything he does, the fact that there is such a lack of understanding about anti-Semitism, if that doesn't reflect poorly on him, then I don't know, I don't know what does, to be honest, because the Anti-Defamation League, they have, in my opinion, over the past couple of years, I would say 5 years, maybe a little bit more, they have decided that instead of being the, organization which is going to be standing up for Jews and defining anti-Semitism and educating people about anti-Semitism, right? Educating people, for example, about Soviet propaganda, Soviet anti-Semitism would be a good thing, right? He's decided and said, no, 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 no. We are the charity of the universe. So every person that's had some kind of, some kinds of discrimination against them, which by the way is disgusting and I don't support. But it's not that it's not, we can't be saying, all forms of bigotry are the same. No, you have to be able to define things. And I think that I don't appreciate Jonathan Greenblatt at all. Actually, I think he's a very disingenuous political operator. But I think also probably we'll get into this a little bit later. But I've also been thinking, especially over the kind of the Passover holiday, where you get a little bit more time to think. About what is it that is so threatening about the Jews. And, when you really start to unpick that, um, you kind of uncover some very surprising, I think, surprising things, surprising realities, right? I mean, if you think about, the story of Passover, here you have a group of people who are willing to literally live in the desert, die in the desert in order to be free. If you're wanting to run a dictatorship or a totalitarian regime, hang on a minute. This group of people who are obsessed with freedom and willing to die in the desert for it, they're kind of a threat to this, right? And so, yeah, and I think that does stand really at the heart of it. it's the audacity to go and start the nation of Israel. They think it's real real chutzpah. Who do they think they are, wanting to be, independent and wanting to be autonomous like this? So yeah, we can get into it a little bit later, but yeah, I have a complex opinion of it.
I mean, when it comes to sort of criticism of ADL, something I have noticed is generally a bit when it comes to sort of politics, and especially when it comes to Israel. On one hand, it's sort of understandable that basically people who are pro-Israel are more on the right, but I've noticed that with ADL has a bit of a problem with sort of spotting anti-Semitism on the right, which in the last few years it has been raising much more on the left, or sort of re-raising much more on the left. So I think it's good to spot that, but it's also good to sort of see the other side. I mean, the one thing that sort of it reminds me of when Elon Musk did his Hitler salute, and it definitely was a Hitler salute. Whether it was doesn't make him a Nazi, but it was definitely a Hitler salute. ADL came out in support of Elon Musk, basically saying, no, he's just he's just weird. And of course, the Steve Bannon did a Hitler salute on the same conference just a bit later. But going to you, Marco, generally, I mean, when it comes to anti-Semitism, it was something that was maybe not necessarily going away, but when Kanye West sort of came out with his DEFCON 5 against Jews, he was like rightfully like completely kicked out of his I think like Nike or Adidas deal, and people were against him as like, dude, this kind of anti-Semitism is not okay. If only he knew, he should just wait a few years, and then most likely he would be rewarded for. Because now, especially what came out of the ADL report is that while anti-Semitism on the right, sort of like white supremacy and all that has been rising, also when it comes to, especially with the so-called pro-Palestinian protests, anti-Semitism on the colleges, sort of like singling out Jewish students, not allowing them to move around. That kind of thing has been rising on the left as well. Marco, what do you make of? Or I mean, I can add one more thing. Something. Whenever we sort of like talk about the rise of anti-Semitism after October 7, something it sort of reminds me is sort of the anti-Arab sentiments after 9/11, which of course are still wrong. Just because you're an Arab doesn't mean you somehow are sort of connected to whatever supported the ideology of 9/11. But sort of like a difference was that you could say Arabs did it, but of course that kind of group thing is wrong. But the rise of anti-Semitism after October 7, Jews were the ones being attacked. It's not like they committed something horrible and then their sort of group was targeted. It was actually the opposite. Jews were the ones being attacked, and anti-Semitic sentiments rose from that attack.
Yes, the report itself, first of all, it only focused on the United States, and we've seen all across the world actually events or instances of anti-Semitism which are worse than ugly. And it is also true that the report itself, you can criticize it perhaps, you can criticize the methodology, you can criticize how they chose to identify something as an incident of anti-Semitism. But the important thing, or the sinister thing, is that today, in 2025, anti-Semitism is acceptable. Out there, it's more and more people are quite happy to express some anti-Semitism, whether they mask it as anti-Zionism or pro-Palestinian. They still do something that until a couple of years ago, as you were mentioning, would have not been acceptable. People would have been picked up on those kind of statements, and it's quite frightening because it's not only a symptom of a degradation in how people interact with each other, but it's also a symptom of a wider malaise that effectively has its root in the moral relativism and the cultural equivalency that we've been pushing under the terms of if effectively every culture is the same, you shouldn't judge somebody just because they dress or act in a different way. And there is a very fine a line. When you expect somebody to respect your religious stuff, well, religious stuff is not based on reality. So forgive me if I giggle when somebody talks about, resurrection or takes those weird stances that are very much rooted in some supernatural event. However, when you start going into the support for violence, calling for violence, and singling out people, and decaying into violence, that's where I'm getting worried. When people start pushing anti-Semitism and they start moving away from just being rude sometimes or insensitive to a certain extent, and they go into being violent, into causing, effectively breaching somebody's individual right, well, that's where we say stop. That's where that's the line that should never be crossed. And more important than sounding anti-Semitic or saying something anti-Jewish is actually the action that is performed in order to cause harm to an individual. And that's exactly the stuff that needs to be called off. And part of the problem is that our mixed economies, the kind of states we live in, favor warfare between groups. So you have lots of groups trying to get the favor of the state in order to advance whatever demands they have. And to a certain extent, then you find yourself having an all-out war between groups. And you end up having a state which is incredibly big, it tries to cater to every single group, and at the same time forgets to do the job it's supposed to do, i.e. individual rights protection. So you see people walking down the street chanting pro-Hamas slogans who are not picked up. People who commit violence against Jewish institutions who are not taken to court and slammed away in a prison cell. And the problem is that these acts should be nipped in the bud, this kind of violence, when it becomes beyond just the stating a view, when it becomes violence against individual, against a group even. This should be dealt with by the state, but the state has forgot its main purpose. And people, of course, tend to take matters in their own hands. So it's not a good place to be, because the thing that we are talking about should be just a relic of the past. It shouldn't be in 2025 that we talk about this kind of stuff.
And I think it's no wonder that it's growing, in the sense that reflects how people behave, isn't it? I mean, cowards thrive in mobs, and mobs intimidate cowards. And in many ways, it's the authorities and the governments who are acting as cowards in the face of these mobs marching through their streets and chanting these the slogans and holding up the banners which indicate such vile sentiments. Now, I think I take Alex's point that this problem of trying to compile a universal ledger of anti-Semitism kind of, it blurs all the different lines between genuine cases, people who claim it where it perhaps isn't the case, or just, I mean, we live in a ruder time than ever, don't we? Where people are treated really badly and service is really bad all over the place in shops and restaurants, etc. Now, to define something as being because of a cause that is just part of the dreadful culture we're in at the moment, but would be a bad thing to do. And it would obviously that within this ledger there are genuine incidences of hideous and violent and threatening and intimidating behavior. And those are the ones which should be highlighted. And often it's a need to sort of focus on particular cases and to know the details of that case to really present the nature in which it's anti-Semitic or not. I mean, we have an equivalent here, sort of organisation in the UK called the Community Security Trust, which does a similar report on the UK. And that came out with a similar kind of figures, really. 3,500 incidents in the UK. It was up from 56% since before October the 7th, down a bit from last year, admittedly, but still higher than it's ever been prior to October the 7th. And I think one of the things that I notice happens with that cowardice of governments is what they do is they give an extra grant of a few more millions of state money to an organization such as the Community Security Trust, who, all right, they are doing good work in the sense of highlighting the nature of anti-Semitism, but more state aid is just throwing some guilt money in one particular direction. So you say, okay, I've tackled anti-Semitism. I gave that organization a bunch more of your millions. And that doesn't solve the problem, because it's a cultural problem, and it's all of the statements that are made within that culture, whether it's within the national broadcaster or MPs or celebrities or the very same MPs, the Home Secretary trotting out some line such as, there is no place in Britain for anti-Semitism, and anyone, found guilty of it will meet the full force of the law. All of that just becomes something trotted out by rote with no meaning, no content to it, no substance to it, other than it's just a placate. It's just empty words, to be honest. So I mean, all of this in there. This is a complex subject, and that's not to underestimate or to not to recognise the real threat that many Israelis and Jews are across the world, including in places like London and New York.
Yeah, and when it comes to sort of, asking yourself, like, what is the solution to the sort of like the rise of anti-Semitism, and to like properly understand it, a big part of it is indeed the fact that government is not acting, or that institutions are not acting, right? If we go to the campus intifada, to students taking over buildings, taking over sort of spaces, and the university not only doesn't do anything, let's say specifically Columbia, just so I'm exact, not only Columbia doesn't do anything about the fact that they are doing it, or at least not immediately, they will negotiate with them. They will negotiate for the divestment of Israel. Again, that's like that is almost like domestic terrorism, or you are like approaching that line when you have like students like just taking over some buildings and then demanding something because they took force against certain parts of the institution. When we go to the Amsterdam, which people might remember, when there was a football match, I think it was Maccabi Tel Aviv that was playing there, and because the local groups, so-called pro-Palestinian groups, knew about it, the night of the match, they went out and started hunting Jews. And again, there was an inaction from the Amsterdam mayor, who knew something might happen, and she didn't prepare the police force for that something might happen. And so we have videos of these people like driving around Amsterdam saying, we are on the hunt for the Jews. And we didn't know. Some people were lost. We didn't know what's going to happen. And there was an inaction by the government. When it comes to the UK, one story we might still do. There was this woman, although it's a separate issue, who was basically arrested for her speech. She posted a tweet after I'm trying to remember what was exactly the story. There was like a knife attack of, I think, maybe an immigrant, or I think like some national, and it was very like many people were angry because of that, and she was arrested and went into jail for basically a tweet that she deleted a few hours later. And that is the fact, because the UK has that law on the books, that basically a speech that would inspire racial hatred is actually punishable. That's something you can be punished. But I don't know if these protests are still going, but you had every Saturday, you had these pro-Palestinian protests going around yelling things like "from the river to the sea," which again is, if there is like a genocidal statement that is sort of like metaphorical, that is the one. If there is something that would inspire racial hatred, that is. And of course, I don't believe in people getting arrested for their speech, but that is something that is in the UK law. And because it's so mixed, because it's so basically unobjective, like what can like inspire racial hatred, that then it becomes sort of like specific, like do you go after these people, do you go after these people, and then it becomes sort of like a separate thing. I mean, Alex, what do you think, what do you think is going wrong when it comes to sort of combating anti-Semitism, or what can we even do about it?
I think people like Jonathan Greenblatt actually, have quite a lot. They have contributed to, I think, an enormous degree to this problem. In that, I want you to kind of imagine, a couple like my parents, right, who would give money to these kinds of organizations. Not as a protection racket, okay, not as kind of you need to give me the money. They would want to give it to organizations. They didn't give it to the ADL, but organizations similar to the ADL, right? My mother gives full tours at Jewish museums, okay, telling kind of the history of the Jewish immigration from the former Soviet Union, right? And so when you then look at, right, what Jonathan Greenblatt has done with that money, then you understand that he has failed in his mandates, right? You do understand that he has failed people like my mom and dad quite badly, who they removed there's I don't know if you guys have, well, probably most of the people that are watching this will know what it is, but Jews put a kind of a scroll on their door, okay? It's like I don't want to. It's a thing that they would put on their door, right? It's one of like the kind of commandments, okay, of Judaism. It's called a mezuzah. I'm sure you've seen them before, right? My grandmother took hers down. In Europe, took hers down because this is a mark of there's a Jew in here. Never taken it down, right? Since they emigrate, since they came to the country, right? And so that's what I'm saying when I'm criticizing somebody like Jonathan Greenblatt, okay, is because if you have billions and billions and billions of dollars that's coming in, that's made up of kind of £10 donations from these ordinary kind of people, and you don't deliver a robust education about anti-Semitism, right? So that people can't even identify it. People can't even identify anti-Semitism. Somebody like Kanye West, who had such a cartoonish anti-Semitism to him, right? I mean, it was almost like a crass kind of anti-Semitism, because anti-Semitism is persistent, right? And it is kind of silent, right? And it's generally eliminationary, right? In that it's about, there are these horrible stinking people who are destroying the world, and we have to save humanity by destroying them, right? It's kind of the altruism even of the Nazis, if you want to call it, right? That they were willing they had to just destroy everything in order to get rid of the Jews. Obviously there was a whole other kind of ideology that was rolled into that, but it's so I think that I think that it is frightening in a way, because when a culture, when a civilization falls into rabid Jew hatreds, it's a really bad sign. It's a really bad sign for that civilization. It was definitely a very bad sign in Weimar Germany. Definitely a very bad sign just before, you know, Stalin fell. Even in the kind of there also was kind of a resurgence of like pogrom activity as kind of the Soviet Union was collapsing and the new Russia was being born, because under kind of the communist system, Jews were banned from doing so much that they really excelled at being these, you know, kind of oligarchs, right? Because they were really great in the black market. Okay, they operated very, very well there. So then you also had all this kind of, oh well, you know, it's the Jews' fault the Soviet Union collapsed. It's the Jews' fault for this, the Jews' fault for that. You know, and I feel that there would be, I feel that, so as we can see, it is a kind of a pattern. And I mean, I don't know. You guys tell me what you think. What do you, I mean, do you feel that this is a symptom in a kind of a whole litany, basically, of problems that we see Western civilization kind of facing right now, right? Because the anti-Semitism, I would say, is sort of like the cherry on top. Okay, it's kind of like the sprinkles. Okay, there's a whole sort of rotten core to this that I'm sure we could identify.
Yeah, it's almost as if, you know, and now I'm talking about from my own experience in Slovakia and sort of my general region. Basically, in my town before World War II, 50% of my town were Jews, one of the biggest sort of Jewish communities in the area. And of course, you know, during and after World War II, all of them were either shipped out to Auschwitz or different concentration camps. And the fact that you know we had that sort of thing, and now we have that there is still a synagogue there you can go and check out. There is like a Jewish memorial that I don't really see almost anybody ever being there, despite that being built. And generally, even like I always remember the story from my high school when we had like a sort of like a sociology class or sort of like a civics class, and we were doing like a head count or sort of like a raise your hand about you know, who would you have a problem of living next to, and like in a class of 30 people, only one person said they wouldn't mind like living next to a Jew. That's it was me, of course, and that's like below the Roma people, who, if anybody knows anything about the Eastern Europe, the Roma people are not very well liked, and even they were sort of like above Jews. That it is really something like almost like a society that is collapsing or a society that is about to go. It's almost like they cannot even wait until they can, you know, start doing something with the Jews. It is truly the sort of like a canary in a coal mine. Like that is sort of like a first thing or like the first group that is being targeted. Maybe go to you, Marco, about yeah.
That's true. I mean, in Europe, there's always been an issue with anti-Semitism. It's a historical issue because, you know, religiously, because the Christian wouldn't handle money because of usury and stuff like that. Usually, the Jews would be less iffy about it. So there would be the people with the money who provide loans and all this kind of stuff. And there was historically, you know, up to the Holocaust, of course, there was a certain hate for the Jews. But I grew up, you know, after you know, decades after the end of the Second War, and I was thought about what's happened during the Holocaust, and we were all thought what happened. We knew how hate will eventually end up producing this kind of tragedies. And I swear I would have never thought that in 2025 we'll be talking about anti-Semitism. Partially, as the report probably misses, the report focuses on, as Alex was pointing out, on the right-wing side of anti-Semitism, where actually, if you look where anti-Semitism is coming out from today, it's very much on the extreme left. Here in London, you only see Palestinian flags and placards. If you go in area with high benefits take up, if you go in council estates where the majority of people live on benefits, on welfare, you will see placards. And the placards here in Britain, like in the United States, are always signed by some socialist, whatever structure or authority or whatever company linked to socialism they are, whether it's a paper or some think tank or whatever. So there is this unholy alliance going on between the extreme left and if you like, the imported anti-Semitism, which is endemic in the Muslim world. If you know anything about Islamic countries and culture, it's incredibly anti-Semitic. And the anti-Semitism has been effectively copied and pasted in the West and has been amplified by the far left, who's trying to use them effectively to, usher a new era of socialism because, millions and millions of deaths have not been enough. So we have to push socialism a bit more. And this time, by aligning themselves with the Muslims, I think anti-Semitism is effectively the price to pay for their support of Islamic culture, really.
And I think this report does highlight this sort of report that the ADL have done based on American incidents, has highlighted where the prevalence is. And of course, it's in the major cities. It's in California. It's in New York. It's in Illinois, in Chicago. It's in those major places, particularly where there is high Islamic populations. I think to talk about some like recent incidents in the UK as more specific examples, like today is Tuesday. On Sunday, in a park in North London called Stoke Newington, there was overnight. There suddenly appeared some swastikas all over where the kids' play area, and that park is bordered by 2 synagogues. Now, the council are quick to clean up that graffiti. It's gone within a few hours, and of course, that's deemed as problem solved. But of course, that's the most visual element of it. But what Marco was saying previously about being taught about, the Second World War, you would never have believed that you would be seeing swastikas. And you haven't seen it at all until recent couple of years, and now it feels like a more prevalent symbol than it's been certainly in my lifetime. I'm not saying it's everywhere by any means, but it is certainly the barrier to using it is now there isn't one for certain people, whereas they would have held that in check in the past. And I think if you look at incidents that occurred like within a month of October the 7th, there was the incident on a London Underground train where a driver driving the train announced through the tannoy for every single carriage in the train, he got a chant going for from the river to the sea. He would shout the first bit, and people in every carriage would shout the following bit because they were all going to a protest. And he knew he was carrying passengers on this train to a pro-Palestinian protest in London. This is within a month of October the 7th. Now, he was taken to a tribunal, and all he had to do was to write an unreserved apology to faith groups, basically sign a letter that was written for him, and he kept his job, and everything carried on as before. But for the impact for anybody on that train who was Jewish, it would have been hugely intimidating to have a mob whipped up all around you just because you happen to be traveling. And of course, you've got this, this authority figure who's driving the train, whipping it up and giving it the justification, glorifying the chant and making it legitimate in such a setting. And that is a true example of hideous anti-Semitism. And what's the punishment? Basically nothing.
Yeah, and when that starts happening, it really, I had a conversation with James Valiant. When it was on the it was when we talked about Ireland, when there was one woman who saw two Israelis, and so she went to spit on them. And I'm not sure if anything ever happened to her, but people started following the guy on Instagram, saying, this is a terrible guy, writing it on all his pictures, where most of his pictures are just sort of like selfies, and that sort of intimidation. My conversation with James Valiant was about sort of the idea of a hate crime, and if it sort of deserves sort of like a separate category, or sort of like a higher category, as if, yeah, you still get the punishment for the crime, but there is something up top for the so-called hate crime, because it's sort of like a specific group. And while we, I think, agree that there's probably not necessarily the case, the sort of the fear, or sort of the threat to, I can be relatively safe when I travel, that I won't be targeted for any sort of crime, unless it's something super random, or I'm super unlucky if I sort of like watch out for what I'm doing. But when I travel now, I normally wear a Jewish pin, or like an Israeli flag pin on my thing, on my jacket, and I take it out when I'm traveling, because I don't want to be targeted for like a random thing. And Richard, you talked about sort of, if there was any Jewish person on the train, how intimidated they would be. But imagine if they had, and maybe we can go to the statistics, where in 2024, 196 assaults, so physical violence has happened to, there was anti-Semitic, and 30% impacted the so-called like visibly Jewish, so people, either Orthodox Jews or people wearing a yarmulke. And imagine if you were on that train and you had some sort of like a sign, or some sort of a symbol that could connect you to the group. I mean, that sort of fear, that sort of intimidation, that people are sort of like afraid to even show that they are Jewish, is something that I think is definitely sort of rising. And I mean, to go to you, Alex, again, or I can read out the rest of the statistic, because we haven't read it and we're like 40 minutes in. So the ADL report came out in 2024. There's been over 6,000, specific 552 sort of individual cases of harassment, including 650 or so bomb threats, 2,600 incidents at anti-Israel rallies. And also the way they calculated is, if basically they didn't count every single like incident when it comes to rally, but if there was something anti-Semitic that happened, they counted it. So thousands of rallies, all of them, I mean, any of them that would chant things like "from the river to the sea," which again is calling for eradication of Israel. 2,600 acts of vandalism, 51% were related to Israel or Zionism, and as we mentioned, 26% were headed by white supremacist groups. And also, of those assaults, 23 involved deadly weapons. Thankfully, I believe at least the report found nobody was killed. So, I mean, yeah, Alex, what can we make of that?
It's, yeah, I think as well that it is nice to have these kind of, well, nice, whatever. I don't know if it's nice, but it's interesting, right, to have these categorized kind of, incidents. But I do think that, getting smacked in the face, right, is universally bad. We all, accept that, apart from, of course, these mental people who are protesting for Hamas, whatever. But in general, we can all, recognize if Daniel was to, hit me in the face with a brick, right? Whereas the kind of thing which the way that anti-Semitism manifests itself, right, is that it is a very subtle sometimes. Okay, like whenever they're at the end of the day, like Bibi is a leader, and he should not get a reaction any more than, let's say, I don't know, Erdogan or something, right? Recep Erdogan of Turkey. right? But instead, the way that he is portrayed, and this is in the mainstream media, I'm not talking about the wackos, right? I'm not talking about the Tucker Carlsons and the whatever the hell these people. I'm just saying the mainstream media of this plotting, scheming, all singing, all dancing, all powerful, Bibi, who has bewitched Trump and has bewitched, right? The rest of the kind of, even using the term neocon, right? They always say, oh, it's the neocon. What do you mean by the neocon? You mean the pro-Israel Americans? Is that what you're talking about? Right? It's sort of like this kind of, synonym, right, for someone who supports Israel and Ukraine, right? That's the neocon. But so it's kind of, so subtle. And that is why I think that the face hitting is sort of, yeah, okay, fine, but we can all get together. We can all recognize if someone's being smacked in the face. But even me, I'm having difficulty articulating what I'm kind of, all of the different ways that you see this type of anti-Semitism. It is the idea that Bibi has managed to bewitch Trump, who's just, little Trump. He could possibly stand up for himself. Oh, no, I gotta be, Bibi's gonna tell me what to do. I'm just Trump. It's ridiculous. I mean, what kind of psychos actually believe this kind of stuff? But it is so pervasive. You see it even on MSNBC, who they're just sounding like garden variety anti-Semites of 15 years ago, right? That people would have said, oh wow, these people are really anti-Semitic. It's so normalized at this point that they're very happy just to kind of say it. Even these really loathsome cretins like John Oliver, okay, with his sort of I don't know what you want to call it, kind of northern working class, like kind of shtick that he has going on for himself, this kind of act that he puts on, like, I'm just a regular kind of guy who's just kind of saying some regular things about some regular people. And it's just this vile virtue signaling, empty, anti-Semitic trash, right? The scheming Jews have gone and lived where they just absolutely should not. The scheming Bibi bewitching the world into doing whatever they want. Does it look like, Bibi bewitched the world? Yeah. Sanctioned by the ICC, right? Does it really look like he's like, oh, he's just a puppeteer? He's the puppeteer. No, it doesn't look like that. It doesn't. Looks like he's a very kind of weak person internationally. I don't know, Daniel, what do you think? Do you think that, like, did you get kind of what I'm trying to say here?
Yeah, I'm always amazed whenever I look up almost like anything about Israel when it comes to the demographics, and what I mean, like the population, the size of the country. Like I looked it up. If I want to go, like, my distance from where I'm here right now to the closest McDonald's, that distance is bigger than the sort of like the width of Israel. Like, it's hilarious how like small the country is. And when it comes to population, I think it's like the double size of Slovakia. Nobody knows who Slovakia is. Everybody knows what Israel is and what sort of like what capability Israel and the Israelis have as people. I mean, what I always see sort of on X, and generally I see a lot of, like, I don't know if I'm being recommended it because I sort of like follow Israeli content, that now I'm being like recommended like anti-Semitic sort of videos, but I get that recommended on any sort of social media where I go to. This a picture of like, this is a American administration and all these people are Jewish, this guy, these secretaries and these people, and what that is like targeting, like, when you really think about it, what the simple thing is, that because Israelis or Jewish people are sort of in high positions, are able to sort of achieve that, that is something that should be sort of targeted. That is something that it's something weird. It's something that we have to sort of look at. That sort of again, sort of like singling out of Israel. There was a clip, me and Marco and Richard on the yesterday's TRS. We didn't play because it was at the end, but there was someone from the UN talking about how, Israel is so bad. It's on the permanent agenda of the UN, which is true. Israel is the I think the only country that has been sort of on like a permanent agenda of the UN General Assembly since its founding. Since it was founded, it was like, we always have to talk about Israel. It's the one country that is sort of like targeted the most. And it again reminds me of that statement. Like, if you only judge the world by what you see at the UN, you will think the most oppressed people are living in like America, or that Israel is this like genocidal state, and you wouldn't even know about China or North Korea. That is something that is truly unique to Israel. And I don't think it can be sort of explained as anything else than sort of like anti-Semitism. And, people on the sort of left try to say, well, it's just anti-Zionism. It's not anti-Semitism. But when it comes to rise of these crimes, it is targeting Jewish people. They do not ask for their opinion before they are targeted. And even if they were, the fact that you have this, these are the good Jews, the people like the Jewish Voice for Peace, these are the good Jews who actually hate themselves enough that they call for their own destruction. That is what makes them moral. Marco?
Yeah, I mean, anti-Semitism as such is beyond stupid. I mean, Ayn Rand makes the point that racism is the lowest form of collectivism. It's the most stupid perceptual level assessment that you make of somebody just because they look different. But wait a second, anti-Semitism. How many Jews have slammed planes into skyscrapers, the Pentagon, and trying to take down the Congress as well? How many Jews are going around the world trying to convert people and being violent about it? So why are the Jews on the receiving end of violence and hate? Is that by any chance somebody is trying to divert the attention from the group that is actually causing all sort of hate and violence in the world? Why is it the left, the supposed super progressive, we love everyone, everyone is the same, has got such visceral hate for Israel and the Jews? Ask yourself that question, and automatically you will have lots of answers. I mean, I do not like that the states, United States and Britain, support religion by providing lots and lots of tax cuts. Here in Britain, mosques, churches, temples, and all sorts of stuff receive a charity status which allows them to take money in and not pay a penny in tax. They don't pay property tax, they don't pay tax on investment, they don't pay tax on income. So why should we support all that? If you want to believe in a ghost in the sky, well, pay for it. Why should I support it? But then making the extra step that some people are supposed to be good and bad at the same level. Some gods are good, some gods are bad. Some people who worship a god are bad, the other ones are good. It's like, what the hell? What's the real agenda here? Let's talk about facts rather than throw it on a purely racist level. That's the thing that annoys me. Why is it that Jews are singled out?
And I think, as Alex said, it is the tip of the iceberg. It is that cherry on the festy pie of attitudes today, isn't it? I mean, you only got to look at the conspiracy theory mindset in the first place to see how detached from rational thinking it is, or thinking at all. And then, of course, the making the Jews the evil string pullers behind any given conspiracy is just further tying together of two irrational thoughts in the first place. I mean, it's all about emotional insinuation and suggestion, and without any evidence or facts to substantiate any point made, and it's repeated by repetition by lazy minds who aren't thinking at all. I think the fact that Jews have been, and I hate to describe, it always feels wrong and dangerous when you start talking about entire groups or nationalities as possessing certain traits, because obviously they're all individuals, and some of them are dumb as hell, and some of them have utterly the wrong ideas, and we've seen that in many of the token Jews picked out to be anti-Israel, for example. But I mean, as general truths, the fact that there are extremely successful people, extremely resilient, self-reliant, the fact that they have, significant self-esteem, all of those things stand in the face of the things that are admired and supported and praised in the culture that we live in, and therefore they are a threat to those people who aren't resilient, who don't have self-esteem, because they don't live according to reality and facts, and make their own actions and their own decisions the subject of their, how they judge their own outcomes. It's always some other evil, that the system that was against them, not whether they made an effort, whether they took a chance, whether they worked hard, etc. Those are the things which clearly, Jews are particularly good at, and are rightfully the results show for themselves. It's a simple cause and effect, but of course these unthinking minds want to always disassociate cause and effect, and that's something Rand pointed out regularly, how necessary it is to concentrate on cause and effect.
Yeah, I also think that I think that whilst kind of as Marco was saying, that of course we don't believe in ghosts or ghosts in the sky. However, I think it is important for us to understand what the other side believes, and maybe understand what's at the root of that, because a theme which runs persistently through I would say the vast majority of kind of Islamic behavior for the past couple of 100 centuries, right? Is that there's a profound conspiratorial jealousy when it comes to the Jews. And the original source for this, in my opinion, is really just because if you read kind of the Quran chronologically, you get to a point where Muhammad's in Medina, and he's really convinced that the Jews are going to be really receptive. In fact, they're going to be excited to hear about his mental revelations, and they laughed at him. Okay. So from that moment on, it kind of turned on a dime, and then it was, okay, the Jews are plotting to kill the entire universe. They always accusing them of disobedience to Allah, right, and ungratefulness, and this idea that the Jewish woman bewitches and kills, that is baked into one of Muhammad's wives that he took from the Battle of Khaybar, that he killed all of her family. She sort of she's in a position whereby her entire her husband, her son has been killed, her father's been killed by this gang of savages, and she's plotting, right, Zainab. So she decides to seduce Muhammad. Hey there, baby, come around. I think I want to make you a little bit of lamb. Don't you want a little lamb dinner? Right. And it reminded me so much of the stories that you would hear of Maya Shem, Maya, the hostage, because she was at some point, cooking lamb for these guys. And I'm like, oh, they just don't learn, do they? Because Zainab, poisoned Muhammad, and it eventually killed him. So and for me, I really think that is the sort of the comical conspiratorial elements whereby you take Soviet kind of mysticism, right, and Soviet conspiratorial, because they need an enemy, and then you match it with it is perfect. So it's just a perfect mix. And also the anger that they felt, right, was because the Jew was the dhimmi, right, which is the lower than under the Ottoman Empire, was the lowest of the low, right? Had to pay tribute money. And then all of a sudden you come back after a few years and there's a Jew on a horse. Jews aren't allowed to ride horses. Jews are only allowed to ride donkeys, and they've got a gun. I mean, it's unthinkable. It's just, it would make you angry, actually. Like, how is this allowed? And kind of furthermore to that, the magical thinking as well that happens when it comes to Jews, that's the sort of collectivist, conspiratorially kind of minded people, okay, have just managed to take on with such real incredible ease. And Hajim al-Husseini, he would be very proud of somebody like, who's the one that keeps going to Yemen and to all these weird places. Who is that American? What's his name again, Daniel?
Oh, Jackson Hinkle.
There you go. Perfect. It's just it's just that's Hajim al-Husseini is like, oh, he's just a lovely man. He's a man of God. He's not woke. He's not woke at all, so it's all good then. Yeah, he doesn't want to tell people his pronouns. He's a great guy. Yeah, he's a and even just that the Palestinian movement was founded by a guy who he wasn't just he didn't just dabble in Nazism, right? He didn't just have a little bit of Nazism on the side, like he was into hey, he had a foot fetish or something. No, he was an actual masterminder, right, of the Holocaust. And the British wanted to try him at Nuremberg. So a guy who the British wanted to try at Nuremberg is the leader of this movement, right? This Palestinian movement. And we don't know, no one is, these are two random facts that are just not connected to each other. Two random facts, nothing to see here. And I think that we all have to be a little bit more honest with ourselves. And certainly I view this way of thinking really as like the enemy. So I think that you have to understand it in order to defeat it. And that sometimes, means that you have to kind of bring yourself into this, I think, is a very low place to understand this real, it's disappointing gobbledygook.
We have a super chat from Bonnie. Thank you so much. Also, somebody in the chat was saying, what I've been hearing is a lot of commenters whine that they are afraid to criticize Israel because they will be labeled as anti-Semitic, which again, simply not true. And yesterday we went through the video from that woman, whatever her name is, I can't remember now.
Katie Holper.
Thank you, Katie Helper. And I'm not sure if I said through the video that she is anti-Semitic, if I ever sort of like even made that comment, but sort of the kind of criticism that Israel gets, the amount of misrepresentation, the amount of like a complete inverse of everything just to be able to criticize Israel. I mean, sure, if you don't want, we don't have to call it anti-Semitic, but they do seem to have a certain sort of like a focus on a specific group that includes Jews. So make of that what you want. With that, I think we've covered this well enough, and I'm sure we could go on for longer. Although one more thing that I might mention to to sort of end this on is while after October 7, we decided to sort of dedicate the channel to focus on Israel because of the unique kind of injustice that is happening by the world towards Israel. And I had a few sort of people who admire Ayn Rand, or at least they say they do, and objectivism, sort of calling out Israel that it's actually not worth defending. I think one of them sort of sent me like a clip from one of Leonard Peikoff's podcasts where he talked about Leonard Peikoff grew up Jewish, and he talked about sort of the at least what Leonard Peikoff perceived as like a tribal culture of sort of Judaism. That I think he recalled the story of like speaking to his father or somebody where they talked about the girl he would have to marry and that she would have to be Jewish. And Leonard Peikoff said something about, but like I'm an atheist, I don't believe. Well, she can be atheist Jewish. Like you don't have to marry a religious person. And that objectivist was sort of putting that as like, because Israel is so tribal or Jewish people are so tribal, it's not worth defending. But when it comes to the criticism of Israel, it's not like they make these arguments. It's not like their objective is around the world and sort of, let's say, bring another thing, sort of like Ukraine. As soon as like the war stops, we'll realize that, yeah, Ukraine is a pretty corrupt place. It's like probably the second or third most corrupt, only like to Russia and Belarus. Like it's not in any way, it's not an ideal place, but the injustice that's happening outweighs any sort of bad that is happening. And sort of you not focusing on that, or you trying to focus on the evil or on the imperfections of a victim is injustice. You are not actually committing to the good. Marco, any last thoughts?
It's not just not committed to the good, it's actively supported the evil. I mean, this is literally civilization versus savagery. This is a bunch of people who want to impose a theocratic dictatorship based on the racist assumption that the Israeli and Jews are not supposed to exist. It's not a political divergence. It's not an intellectual debate. It's pure hate. It's about, shall we go back to the Middle Ages or shall we move on to the future? That's what it is.
And if the ultimate example of anti-Semitism is the need to rewrite October the 7th into a narrative of the victims deserved it. I mean, it's despicable and hard to fathom that people can do that and continue to do it. And I think the fact that in the time that's passed since, you've seen the fringe rhetoric of anti-Semitism that's frankly always been there, or the hidden aspect of it, come into standard platitudes that you'll hear people say in a cafe to one another. It's the drip effect that has made it acceptable for ordinary people to just trot out anti-Jewish or anti-Israel lines that without even thinking, just because they're repeating them by rote. And of course, all of that does is foster the same sentiment that was expressed in terms of blaming October the 7th victims for the hideous treatment that they endured and are still enduring.
Well, on the October 7th and sort of rewriting, rape is the language of the oppressed, of course. So, and also, where can people find you?
You can check out the Briefly Objective sister channel to this. Link below for short and form material with added visuals. So please check it out, like, watch, and subscribe.
And Alex, your last thoughts, and where can people follow you or anything else you'd like to recommend?
Yeah, just in the kind of the last couple of seconds here, I'd actually like to I'd like to recommend Tucker Carlson's father, Dick Carlson, right, who sadly died around a month ago. No, I'm being serious. Really good guy. He was the former president of the Foundation for the Defense of Democracies. Really amazing think tank that produces fantastic stuff. And Dick Carlson, as the former president, he did produced such fantastic stuff, such great such great minds, like for example Jonathan Conrigas from the, it's just one of them. There's so many. So I would actually like to really recommend Dick Carlson and some of his work. And I really kind of would want to dedicate the episode, in my opinion, at least, to him, because it must have been really sad for the 85-year-old to see what his son has been getting up to over the past couple of years. It must have really been quite distressing. I mean, this is a guy who really, well, foundation for the defense of democracies, I say.
And with that, thank you guys for joining me today. Thank you everybody for watching. We'll be back tomorrow with another episode of The Daily Objective as well as the reality show. Thank you and bye-bye.
Bye-bye.